It was a meaningless win to wrap up the season with nothing on the line and no impact on the final standings, and it was absolutely perfect as Udonis Haslem led all scorers with 24 points. We'll give you our takeaways from the OG's big game, and with a play-in tournament set for Tuesday, can the Heat take care of business versus the Hawks? We preview the upcoming game and how the regular season ended on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However, you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. We're recording this after the Heat's 123-110 win over the Orlando Magic to end the regular season. We'll get to our thoughts on the upcoming play-in game against the Hawks on Tuesday and the regular season as a whole. But first, we got to get to the big story of the game and the afternoon, and that was Udonis Haslem playing his final regular season game, 20 years with the Miami Heat, his last game, and he came out firing 17 shots, including 7 3-pointers, 24 points in 25 minutes. We'll get to some of our favorite scenes and just kind of our anecdotal stuff from here at the arena in a second, but just in general, what did you think about the way Haslem went out?
Fantastic. As he said himself, he couldn't have pictured it any better. An emotional moment, and yet also a functional basketball game in the very loosest of senses. This game felt like a glorified AAU game, perhaps, or something along those lines, maybe a high school tournament. Not a lot of intense competitiveness out there, but UD brought it. He addressed the crowd beforehand. He was given a rocking chair by Bam Adebayo as a last joke before his retirement, and yet he went out there and played a good, solid game. And look, a lot of it was manufactured because, again, there was a very obvious lack of competitiveness. But for him to go out there, still shoot threes, catch a lob from Duncan Robinson, have a big dunk, just be there for good moments. It was an emotional experience, a fun one. Eric Spoelstra, Udonis Haslem, Bam Adebayo, everybody who spoke about the game and his performance specifically raved about how just it was a perfect end to what has been an incredible career.
It was a perfect end. It could not have come in a better context either. I love Udonis Haslem. He's also 42 years old.
Sure.
And the Heat, I guess his teammates challenged him to try to get 20 shots tonight. Yeah. He ended up with 17.
And you're right, according to Bam.
Not good enough, I guess. But it was the best Udonis Haslem game we've seen in a very long time. Sure. But also because this game was meaningless, it provided that kind of atmosphere. It gave him that opportunity. If this was what we thought maybe coming off of last week's game against the Philadelphia 76ers last Thursday night, they beat the Sixers, kind of keeping their hopes for maybe getting out of this play-in tournament alive. Right. And then the Heat decide to rest their starters Friday night against the Wizards. They lose that game. They lock themselves into the number 7 seed, the top seed in the play-in tournament. Either way, that wouldn't have mattered because the Nets beat the Magic that same night, so the Heat would have been locked in anyway. But whatever, because they're locked into the 7th seed, there was just like this no pressure environment. And if this game really mattered, if this was a game where the Heat had to win in order to make the play-in tournament, Udonis Haslem doesn't check in 3 minutes into it and take 17 shots. That just doesn't happen. But because the Heat were locked into this and they were sort of in this unique situation where this game did not matter at all in terms of where the standings are, it gave Haslem that chance. And I think that when Haslem says he couldn't imagine any better, I know that he prefers that this team was not playing in the play-in. Everybody in that locker room does, but it was kind of cool. Like when you're kind of looking for silver linings in life, like this is the kind of thing. It's like, okay, would you rather be in the playoffs and not have to do the play-in tournament? Of course. Right. But all things considered, we got a really cool night. And I'm telling you, man, this is my favorite Heat game of the season, I think.
It was just so fun. I caught myself unusually very unbiased media row kind of laughing and reveling in those moments that you talked about, seeing the interaction between Udonis and the rest of the Heat group there, and just even in the Orlando Magic players too, just like kind of coming up to him, giving him high fives, just because he means so much, not just to the Heat, but to the NBA. And it's a good point you bring up there because the looseness of the situation allows him to be honored the way he's supposed to. He can't get this kind of playing time. He can't continue to show the fans that have supported him for 2 decades that he's still a great and functional player if he's, in the middle of a tightly contested game with incredible playoff stakes, on the line here. So for him to go into this game and just be able to shoot well and play well and just have a fun with it. Have fun with it. To be able to write the end of his story means so much to NBA players and to Udonis personally. And for him to be able to go into a game and be inserted here and have big moments and relish in those with his family and Dwayne on the sidelines and Eric Spoelstra there cheering him on. It was perfect.
Yeah.
So much fun.
And he said it. He's like, I'm going to go out the way that I want to go out. He's like, do I go out the way Kobe went out and try to score 60? No, he's like, I can't do that. Can I try to get a triple-double like Dwayne Wade? No, I can't really do that. But he's right. He went out. We got the patented 15-foot baseline jumper.
Three-pointers.
He posted up some poor Orlando Magic player that doesn't really play that much. He did that. He had a dunk. Like you mentioned, the alley-oop from dunk. That was freaking crazy, and I saw it too. As soon as it happened,
right?
It was it Vic that got that deflected the ball.
I think so, yeah.
And then Duncan Robinson kind of picks up the loose ball, and or Haslem does it, and he kicks it back to Duncan Robinson on the break, and then Duncan Robinson, and just immediately it's the 2-on-1 situation. Duncan Robinson lobs it up, and 42-year-old Udonis Haslem unfurls his whole 42-year-old body.
Dunk.
Does his best, gets up in the air and dunks it. And I'm telling you, I'm like you, man. Like, you try to be as well-intended on that press row as you can. You try to be as objective as you possibly can. But, man, when that happened, I did a huge fist pump.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
That was great.
It was so exciting. It was so cool to see that.
I love that he was able to be like the leading scorer of the game too for a little while there. Duncan, who caught fire again in a meaningless game, I thought he was going to be the leading scorer for the Heat, but then Udonis hits a 3 at the end, and Dwayne Wade telling, I think it was Jamal Cain, foul, so that he could commit a foul, so that Udonis could leave the game with 58 seconds left to another standing ovation. Right. It was just a great emotional moment. And that's what that's what Udonis means to the organization. So it's like a microcosm of his whole career, that he means so much to the fan base, to the organization, to be able to be honored in this way. It couldn't have been done any differently. And it worked out so well.
I love that D Wade flew in. I love that he wore a number 40 jersey in courtside with his youngest daughter and Gabrielle Union. Yeah, I wore it backwards so that you could see the name for the cameras and everything. D Wade, very obviously and characteristically playing to the cameras quite a bit afterwards. But it was cool. I love the rocking chair bit. So Udonis Haslem, we're here at the arena. Udonis Haslem says thank you to all the fans, and that's usual. At the end of the regular season, last home game,
right?
You have a player, some representative come by and say thank you to the fans. It's always fan appreciation night, blah, blah, blah. Right. And it doubled as Udonis Haslem's farewell, obviously. And so Haslem giving that speech, telling everybody how much it means to him, and then Bam Adebayo gifting him with an old man rocking chair. That was hilarious. It was just loose, man. Like in a regular season that has felt anything but loose.
Right.
It was like I said, it wasn't. I mean, maybe I misspoke a little bit. It was my favorite. It was not my favorite Heat game of the year. There was obviously much better basketball games played. But in terms of games that we covered and games that I have covered this year, it was the best atmosphere of a game that I've covered. It was the most fun I've had covering a game in a very long time.
If there's a common theme amongst us and the reporters covering this team this season, it's like it just feels tiresome. Like there is no fresh energy. The closest approximation was when Kevin Love joined the team after the All-Star break, and there was a slight buzz to it.
It was like new guy to talk to.
It's something different. Like there was a different energy. It's like, oh, we're investing in and getting better, etc. Right. But aside from that, a lot of the season has just been a slow grind, a sloth. And this was just fun. It was just fun to see everybody there, to see Kyle Lowry there, who's only been with the team for 2 years, to see Jimmy Butler, who didn't play tonight, cheering on for UD. Dwayne, so many great positive moments.
Spoelstra waxing poetic every chance he got. I mean,
he's emotional.
He got very emotional pre-game, post-game. Haslem got a little emotional post-game. We got a Udonis Haslem podium game for the first time in a very long time. It was really, really cool. And I'm very glad that I was able to basically just in my own personal media career come back to Miami and kind of be able to witness the last couple of years of Udonis Haslem, because he just means so much to the organization, to the city, and you really felt that in the air tonight. We'll talk a little bit more about what Udonis Haslem said about this team and what he thinks that they could do in the playoffs in a little bit. But coming up next, the Heat, they're going to face the Hawks Tuesday in that play-in game. Are they in danger of maybe overlooking Trae Young, and the Atlanta Hawks. We'll talk about that next. But first, David, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Daily fantasy made easy. It's so simple to be able to log on to PrizePicks, to check it out, and to be able to place a wager. You're making an entry. It's really takes less than a minute to do so. You just pick 2 to 6 players, and if they'll go score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 25 times your money. It's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. And they offer projections at any sport: the NBA, Major League Baseball, men's and women's college basketball, the WNBA, Euro basketball, disc golf, boxing, and so many more. Entries can be made, again, in under a minute, safe and fast withdrawals, and currently operational in over 30 states in Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com today and play daily fantasy sorts. And you can get a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100 back. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100.
Locked On Heat is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please do subscribe. We're not doing credit cookies, which was usually what we do in the second segment of these post-game shows, because this game did not matter at all, not even a little bit. And so we're not going to do that. But I do want to look ahead right now to the play-in game. On Tuesday, it's going to be either at 7 o'clock or 7:30 on TNT, Tuesday night here at Kaseya Center. And I do think that I don't want to say that we're overlooking it, but I think there is a segment of the Heat fan base that is sort of overlooking this. Look, I get it. The Heat are 3-1 against the Hawks this year. They wiped the floor with them in the first round of the playoffs last year. The team is a little bit different with DeJounte Murray, obviously, but like I said, they've had their number this year too. There is that narrative out there, and it's not. I even hesitate to use the word narrative because it is factual. Like, they play Trae Young well. Like, Trae Young does not play well against the Miami Heat. Historically, does not put up good stat lines against the Heat and struggles. That said, I think the Hawks are really talented. I think that these play-in games cannot be taken lightly. You just ask the Clippers last year, man. Like, they thought they were going to get out of the play-in round, and they didn't. They were not able to make the playoffs. So This stuff is not easy. It's not a given. It's the first time the Miami Heat have been in a play-in tournament, and I think that kind of matters. And so, I don't think that you could take the Hawks lightly because of how talented they are. Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, Bogdanovich, like any of these guys, if they just go off for 30, that could be it. And next thing you know, you're playing the winner of the Raptors or the Bulls just for a chance to get into the number 8 seed.
Yeah, a lot of high risk situations there if a player catches fire. And that's the kind of randomness of these one-off situations, is that you never know what happens. It's like, let's say,
that's worst case scenario. That's why the NBA wants it.
Yeah,
it's
worst
exciting.
Case scenario, an injury, and all of a sudden you've got to find a way to scrap, what's left together in order to find a way to win. Or again, if this is the game that Trae Young catches fire against Miami, and a lot of that's been overblown. Look, to your point, he's a good player. I know he's a kind of high variance type shooter, but he's going to make impact plays with his passing, and you just don't want somebody else to catch fire. If Miami truly does have his number, and I don't think that's again overstating it to a certain degree, it's everybody else that you've got to watch out for. And so, yeah, it is a very dangerous place for Miami to be in. Given all that, though, the way they spoke about the play-in tournament and the newness of it, again, a franchise first, I don't think they're taking Atlanta lightly. I don't think they're saying, oh, we're already looking ahead to facing Boston in the 2-7 matchup. It's not about that. It's about beating Atlanta on Tuesday, moving on, and then getting the rest that you need. But you focus on Atlanta first and foremost. At least that's my takeaway from hearing how the players were talking afterwards. And Eric Spoelstra.
Yeah, I don't think that the Heat are going to overlook it, but I do think that there is something to be said about this being the first time you're in this is the first time they've ever been in a win or go home situation, really. Right. I mean, the playoffs I know you get a game 7, I suppose, operates that way, but not really. Like,
that's a ramp up to that.
Exactly. You've got a history, there's scouting, like there's adjustments. Like, this is like, okay, Atlanta Hawks. Yeah, we've seen you 4 times this year. Like, every year they're in the division, but like that could work both ways, right? Because the Hawks know what they're going to expect with the Miami Heat. So you mentioned rest there, and that's an important point here, because the Heat win in Philadelphia on Thursday. They don't play their core guys Friday against the Wizards. They play their core guys very little tonight. So Jimmy Butler did not play tonight with rest. Max Strus played 10.5 minutes. Bam played 8 minutes. Tyler played 9 minutes. Gabe played 7 minutes. Kyle played 9.5 minutes. Kevin Love played 9 minutes. Caleb Martin played 10 minutes. So you're looking at their core rotation guys, and they basically, on a Sunday afternoon, got some cardio in. You know what I mean? And so for all intents and purposes, there was rest. And they're going to practice on Monday.
Right.
I'm going to imagine it's not going to be one of those
No,
wearing your knee
two-a-days.
pads.
Yeah.
No knee pad practice. It's going to be more of, I would imagine,
Film session.
film work, get what you need, and basically a walkthrough of how they want to approach playing the Atlanta Hawks, I would imagine. They could even do that Tuesday morning, but obviously they'll do some of that on Monday afternoon as well. So you get 4 full days before the play-in tournament. If you don't kind of include the cardio that they got in today, you got 4 full days, and especially for Jimmy, you get full days of rest going into the play-in game. And then perhaps if you win this play-in game, depending on if they play their first round game Saturday or Sunday, April 15th or April 16th, they can get 3 to 4 full days of rest going into that. So obviously not what you would want. You would prefer to just not be in the play-in and have a whole week off, basically like they had last year as the number 1 seed. But rather than that, this is a team that is healthier than they were going into the playoffs last year when Lowry and Herro were already dealing with some nagging injuries. These guys are healthy. They're sort of manufacturing as much rest as they can. And if you're able to take care of business Tuesday night, you're going to be pretty rested, all things considered.
No, I think that is a good point. Are you saying rested for the play-in or rested for whatever potential
for the playoffs
matchup?
Afterwards? Yeah.
No, I mean, we're kind of guilty of it too. Then are we overlooking Atlanta to a certain degree?
It's not our job. We don't have to go out there and beat the Hawks.
No.
Like, we're allowed to overlook as much as we want.
I think there is a danger in Atlanta. I know they might not be the best team, but their record doesn't necessarily reflect it. I know a lot of the talk has been that they've been barely above or below 500 for most of the season. They've got the coaching change in Quinn Snyder. I wonder how much of a factor that's going to be.
Spo is very complimentary of Quinn. And he has been for a very long time. They have a good relationship. But then today asked about it also. And to your point, it does not sound like they are overlooking him. And he said like they're playing really well. I don't know if I agree with really well, but they've been fine. I don't know that they've been
better than
they're marginally better. But yeah, to your point, he's a really good coach and he's going to be prepared. And I think there's a lot of motivation for the Hawks to try to get out of this.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. I think Miami has the right attitude, and I think that it's the looking ahead is not necessarily a danger because Miami's always seemed to understand, I guess, as a franchise and over the course of Jimmy Butler's career, maybe not necessarily representative by this season, but I think they've always understood what's at stake on a night-to-night basis.
And that's the key there is Jimmy Butler, I think. Jimmy, in this scenario, and having the rest that he has, he's going to go all out. You know that he does not want to play a second play-in game. You know he feels comfortable against the Atlanta Hawks as much as they switch and everything like that. There's just so many small dudes that he could just take into the post over and over again. That includes Trae Young, but it's not limited to him.
No.
And I don't think he's scared of anybody on that Hawks roster. And so when again, not even overlooking or anything here, but in terms of just my confidence level in the Miami Heat playing the Hawks, it's high. It's high because they do play them well.
Yeah, ranking the teams that you could potentially face, either Toronto or Chicago, Atlanta was the least dangerous, at least in our opinion.
When you have Jimmy Butler in that matchup, it works. And defensively, what the Heat have been doing recently is a lot of like what their strategy is against Trae Young in the playoffs last year, which is every time he comes off of a ball screen, trap him. And you saw that tonight with the Orlando Magic. You had a Udonis Haslem trapping anonymous Magic players off of ball screens.
Machine all over again.
Yeah, and so they're sort of kind of already in that groove of playing that defense, at least schematically, that you would want to play in sort of a long first-round scenario like they did last year. So in terms of where they are and how they're peaking kind of going into this, I feel good about where they're at. You don't want to overlook them. It's a high-variance thing. Like you said, it takes Trae Young coming out and making 8 of 13 three-pointers to kind of put that game away.
Which is a potential option, but you play your game. You control what you can control. You focus on doing the best job that you possibly can, and then you can't predict when those insane hot shooting nights will happen, but you do everything that you have to assure yourself of a victory.
It was a disappointing season. Udonis Haslem said that the Heat are getting hot at the right time, kind of to our point we just made. He did compare them, this Heat team, to a previous championship Heat team. We'll tell you which one next, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is the coolest game I've played in a very long time, and I tell you, I'm basically addicted to this thing. I've always thought that I could be a great NBA general manager. It turns out it's pretty easy.
According
the copy says it's not all that easy. I tell you, I'm really freaking good at this. If you may have heard me do this read before, I've just won back-to-back championships on this thing. Look, if you had the same thought that maybe you could be a great general manager of an NBA franchise, then then this game's for you. Go download Ultimate Pro Basketball GM right away. The game allows you to manage every strategic aspect of your franchise. You're playing through a season, leading your franchise and fans to glory as you build a historic dynasty, which is I am currently in the process of.
Wow.
In the simulation, you're responsible for dealing with challenging personalities, players, coaches, all those things. You want to hire the right coaches, hire the right assistants, trading and training your players, making your draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft, all of the ups and downs of multiple seasons. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is completely free. It's playable offline. You can play on the go. You can play for 4 straight hours on the plane from Bozeman, Montana to Miami, if you're in that kind of situation, perhaps. And whenever you want.
To be going to Bozeman.
Like I said, I love this game. I'm addicted to it. I've won back-to-back championships. I feel very good about it. Locked On Heat listeners can get a 100% free boost to their franchise when you're using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. Download the game. Just visit probasketballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up in the App Store. That's probasketballgm.com. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. Start your dynasty today. Reach Locked On Heat on Twitter, Instagram, email us lockedonheat@gmail.com. Udonis Haslem was asked about the Heat's chances in the playoffs. He said that they're getting hot at the right time, then compared these Heat to the 2006 team that obviously went on to win the championship. That team, David, won 22 of their last 32 games to close the regular season. D-Wade, Shaq, UD, that group went on to beat the Mavericks in the championship, as Heat fans know. Slightly different than winning 3 in a row before you start resting your starters. But what did you think about that comparison?
I think it was a little off the mark. I hate saying it on the day we're honoring Udonis Haslem. I love that the energy is there, because I've been pretty consistent in saying that this team does have the capacity to go on those those hot streaks, mostly because of Jimmy Butler, as we talked about in the previous segment. And he raises the bar so much higher for Miami. The problem with the comparison in my eyes is that the baseline of talent is so disparate in terms of what 2006 was, with 4 Hall of Famers on that roster in comparison to 8 undrafted players on this roster. And it's not necessarily a knock on the undrafted players, which I know has become very easy for a lot of Heat fans to make, but I just think the ceiling isn't necessarily as high for this version of this team as it was for a team with Dwayne Wade in his prime, or entering in his superstar prime in 2006, with a still very functional Shaquille O'Neal, Gary Payton, Alonzo Mourning.
Shaq was a year removed from top
MVP.
5 MVP status. So
yes.
you had, to your point, entering your prime Dwayne Wade, and sort of at the tail end of, but still very much in that prime of Shaquille O'Neal. And you could say, well, this team's got Jimmy Butler, and not much is true. Bam Adebayo kind of entering his prime right now. Maybe there is something to it. At the end of the day, I don't know. I don't love the comparison either. I don't think it's a great one. I think that team had really high expectations, like this one does, going into the season.
It was supposed to be a contending team. Hence the huge trade in the 2005 offseason, where you trade for Jason Williams, Antoine Walker, et cetera.
Right. So maybe it felt like maybe last year's team was closer to that. But either way, based on where the Heat are, they're shooting 37% from 3 over their last 10 to 15 games. That's been such a watermark for this team all season long, and it's starting to feel finally like they're not at an elite 3-point shooting level, but it's not quite the drag on this team as it had been for so much of the year.
Yeah.
And so you have that. You've got arrested Jimmy Butler. You got to win this play-in game on Tuesday night, obviously. But then after that, you're playing the Boston Celtics in the first round, which is the other problem. The Celtics are a really good basketball team. I know that there's a segment of Heat fans that think that the Heat have the Celtics number just like they have the Hawks numbers. Ooh. And you challenged them, but like the Celtics also beat them in the finals, in the conference finals last year, and they've gotten a lot better. Yeah, especially Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So I don't know. In terms of the comparison, it's fine. It's fun. I like that. There is an air around this team, though, kind of zooming out from just Udonis Haslem's quote, that they do feel like they're playing their best basketball. And I think the numbers even back that up. And I think what you and I have seen on the court backs that up. This is kind of the best basketball that they've been playing all year. Does that mean it's good enough to make a deep playoff run? I have no idea. We'll see, I guess. But this is the best they've played, and they're healthy. And I will go back to that point because I think it's a very important one. that this team had the number 1 seed, but they were not healthy going into the playoffs last year. And they really needed that week of rest when they didn't have to play the play-in game. And that week of rest still didn't get them healthy and in the right shape. They got a little lucky with Joel Embiid breaking his face in the second round. Yet to be seen if they're having any kind of similar injury luck to their opponents this year. But this team is as healthy as they've been, and I think that's really going to matter. Kyle Lowry refreshed coming off the bench. It kind of feels like they figured something out with this rotation.
Yep.
If they can get enough stops, which is a weird thing to say because I feel like they could score enough points in certain matchups, but if they can get enough stops like that and kind of get the games played at the pace that they want to play at, and if that 3-point shooting continues and they could stay healthy, I don't know. That I guess is the roadmap. I'm not here stating my confidence. I'm not ready to do anything like that or make any kind of prediction. But in terms of why the vibes around the team right now are good, that's a big part of it.
No, I have to agree with that. I think the health factor in combination with a bunch of different factors. The fact that this is, that you enter into the series, any series that you might go with the idea that your best player is as good as any other best player on any other roster, with the exception of maybe Giannis or Joel Embiid. I think we've seen MVP type Jimmy Butler performances consistently throughout the playoffs to the point where I think he gives Miami a heightened sense of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
You've also got the veteran experience now of Kevin Love, Kyle Lowry, etc. Guys that have been tested in this, even younger players like Tyler, etc. They've been through this. They know what's at stake. They know how to make these kind of adjustments throughout the course of a playoff series. So there's a lot trending in the right direction for Miami. And that's all you really want. I mean, you can't control what happened during the first 40, 50 games of the season. Now it's just all about making continued growth, progress as you go into the next series, whatever that might be.
Fun night overall to celebrate Udonis Haslem. I am so freaking glad this regular season is over. I am very excited for the playoffs, not just for the Miami Heat. I'm excited for this play-in game. I'm excited for the playoffs in general. I think these are going to be a really fun NBA playoffs. We will have a full kind of X's and O's preview of this Hawks game later on. But for now, thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Now make your second listen Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. David, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Wes, and thanks to Udonis Haslem for 20 great years.